Hi folks, welcome to this edition, the May 2017 edition of the Alumni Network Masterclass. If you could just bear with us for 1 second, after going live we just have to make a few adjustments, so please bear with us just for 1 second. There we go. And can I just check to those watching, it would be great if you could just send a message to make sure that there wasn't any echo. We had a few technical issues last week, so please accept our apologies for the technical challenges we had. But it's great to be joining all of you live today. I'm Simon Robinson, I think all of you know me, and this is Maria. If you want to say hello.
Hi everybody.
And what we want to do in this particular masterclass is really focus on strategy. And when we talk about strategy, we're going to talk about strategy in two different ways. Strategy in terms of business strategy. How do you actually impact, how do you actually change the strategy that a business has? Because this is really where you can have an impact as an activist, really working to introduce the systems view of life into an organization. And then also, what's your personal strategy? How can you develop your particular way of working? Are you developing a consultancy? Are you going to be working in partnerships? So we'll talk about people's personal strategies to become more effective change agents. But before we do, I'd just like to review a few bits and pieces. It's been an incredible couple of weeks on the current spring edition of the Capra Course. We've come to an end, it's the final week. And as always, it's been absolutely incredible. And there was one particular conversation, it was very much all about how you actually have, how you make meaningful disturbances in organizations. And I thought that would be a really great theme. So what I thought we would do is just read a very short section from the Systems View of Life. Now this paragraph, it comes from chapter 14, section 14.5.3. And in the English edition, it's on page 318. For those of you who have the Portuguese edition, this section is on page 394. According to the Santiago theory of cognition, a living network responds to disturbances with structural changes, and it chooses both which disturbances to notice and how to respond. What people notice depends on who they are as individuals and on the cultural characteristics of their communities of practice. A message will get through to them not only because of its volume or frequency, but also because it is meaningful to them. We're dealing here with a crucial difference between a living system and a machine. A machine can be controlled. A living system can only be disturbed. This implies that human organizations cannot be controlled through direct interventions, but they can be influenced by giving impulses rather than instructions. To change the conventional style of management accordingly requires a shift of perception that is anything but easy, but it also brings great rewards. Working with the processes inherent in living systems means that we do not need to spend a lot of energy to move an organization. There is no need to push, pull, or bully to make it change. Force or energy is not the issue. The issue is meaning. Meaningful disturbances will get the organization's attention and will trigger structural changes. And Maria and myself, some of you may know that we actually have a business strategy consultancy here in Sao Paulo, Holonomics Education. And what we wanted to do today is just share some of our experiences, really making meaningful disturbances in organizations. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the second part of this masterclass. Also, just a couple of things I wanted to mention. On my blog, Transition Consciousness, I've posted an article by Fritjof He wrote the foreword to a really interesting new book by Jeremy Lent on the patterning instinct. And also on Fritjof's own website, he's just published an article about the book Transformative Ecological Economies by his good friend Ovi Jacobson. So please do look out for those as well. And finally, we've also received a number of different questions that are just really interesting. So we'll run through the questions now, and we'll start to comment on the questions, and then we'll also, carry on discussing the questions throughout this masterclass, because some of the scopes of the questions are quite big. So Manuel asked, in its present form, can capitalism eradicate poverty in the world and create a sustainable world? What type of economic system do you see best to create a just and sustainable society? Take Brazil, for example, with its 90 million poor people. Just to explain, Maria is Brazilian, for those who don't know Maria. So that's an interesting question. And Manuel also finished by saying, who are the economic thinkers that you recommend in order to evolve beyond unregulated global capitalism? So these are big questions in scope, and we'll come back to them in a second. Claire asked, what if leaders talk the talk and model it in their output, but they can't see that their governance practices are still stuck in top-down, command and control linear practices? That again is a great question, because often companies ask Maria and I to come in and try and make some meaningful disturbances to not so much disrupt, but evolve the way in which conversations are flowing in the organization for them to be more effective. And finally, Jared said, Maria and Simon, for future masterclasses, given your backgrounds in consulting with larger corporations, I would really like to dive into what potential corporations have for supporting the planet and not destroying it. Again, that's a really interesting question, because this week was quite interesting for Maria and myself. I was presenting a talk on our books, Holonomics and Customer Experiences with Soul, and Maria was at this event as well. We were at the largest expo on pharmaceuticals and cosmetics in Latin America. And it was really interesting. Quite a few of the talks, not just our talk, the talk I gave was infused with systems thinking, but systems thinking, a few other people did mention systems thinking. And although, they didn't really go into depth, I think it's interesting this year. I feel I've seen many more references and people kind of talking about systems thinking. One of the brilliant things about Capra Course is I feel it gives such an in-depth introduction to systems thinking. It's not superficial. And I don't know what you thought about some of these presentations. I thought it was great. It's a really great start. But the challenge for all you guys watching this masterclass is, now that people are beginning, I think a lot of companies are now recognizing systems thinking, but how can you really help them implement solid solutions that are based on solid systemic theory?
Yeah.
What was your impression?
Yeah, I can see that this necessity to see things more systemically is growing. It's incredible to see how in this event, people, as you said, talked about systemic, they need to see more systemic in this from a systemic point of view, and the value of good communication. So all the things are coming to be more evidence nowadays in organizations. And another point that is being very interesting is about leadership. How leaders are inspiring people to do the disturbance.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the point. Going a little into some of these questions about which kind of capitalism, which kind of economic system, in fact, is something behind the system that we have to improve. We have to look about the behaviors we have to change our behaviors. Yeah. And we have really appreciate and value the network, other people in our lives, the power of our people in order to create things, to create new things. So the key point is what is behind. It's interesting because nowadays we are talking a lot about new technologies, digital technologies, the digital consumers, and etc. But if we don't have values, the technology is useless. So if we not can see the power and the importance of everybody together and doing things in a same way, or not same way, but for a same purpose, we will not have any good system, economic system. The economic system is a consequence of the human behaviors. It exists in order to regulate or to make things happen. If who is doing that don't have behavior with values, you not have any good system working. We can see that in a smaller environment that is a company. Our organization. It's very interesting that us as a consultants, we can see companies sometimes in the same sector. They are the same, they are competitors, they have the same purpose in large sense, but it depends on the leadership that are there, the culture, that the attributes of the culture that make people work together, and the relationship with the environment, the ecosystem of the organization, the clients, depends on how these things work, they are totally changed, and the results are totally different. So I can say that these things, we have to discuss these things before start to talk about system, because the system is the consequence of these behaviors. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting. At this event, I was also on a panel session at the end where, you know, people in the audience had the opportunity to ask questions. And you can really see the different cultures in organizations. So I'm never really a great fan of saying, oh, corporations, they're destructive, they'll never change. There's a continuum. And at this event, it was like a bit of a sea change. Some are now talking about systems thinking. And there were some really quite senior people in the audience, and they were asking us some really interesting questions. Because in the past, you know, people at a very senior level, they deal with different types of methodology. So what are the processes? And when you're an activist, it's really worth trying to understand, well, what kind of innovation methodologies and frameworks and tools are these companies using? And one particular woman was there, and she was saying, well, how do I really get, you know, the most senior people to change? And I was saying, it's not you don't just introduce one more methodology. That's not what is going to change. It's all about culture. And this is why I think it's just so interesting that if you really want to change how a company is thinking about innovation, because innovation is an absolute key thing for many of these companies. And it's what we're trying to do, especially in our work, is we talk about innovation and values and innovation and purpose, and also innovation and soul. And this was really interesting because I actually started my conversation, my presentation, I said, the most disruptive word that we can use in innovation is soul. And it was really interesting to see the reaction, because that has an impact on people who are really quite people focused. They kind of understand that, you know, the world is changing, society is changing. And then there are other people that are still very much focused on the technology. And they're like, because there is this bigger change. We were talking about the fact that people are buying less stuff now. There's actually a lot of research that backs this up. A lot of people are now buying less stuff, and they're searching for more experiences. And I think that's a really interesting trend, because it does mean that this obsession with, you know, the more kind of polluting and destructive parts of our consumerism, it's an opportunity to reduce the physical consumption, but it's an opportunity to have a more meaningful life. But the companies that get this, they're the ones that are going to be flourishing in the future, the ones that really understand societal change. So to come back to Manuel's question, it's not really a case of building a kind of mechanistic system that you then say, right, here's the economic system. There's some really interesting evolutionary things happening all over the place. It's not just, say, in the sustainability sector. And I think that's one of the key points. Strategy for activists, our whole approach is that you have to work with big organizations and you have to really treat them with humanity and really develop relationships with people in different parts of the organization to really understand it, because you can't really, this is the key thing, unless you really understand an organization, you can't make a meaningful disturbance. And we're getting some really interesting requests from companies that you may think are a bit traditional, but it's just really interesting. You know, there are people working in the strategy department, the innovation department, there are people in the HR department, and this is an interesting conversation. If you really want to make a meaningful disturbance across the whole organization, think about starting with the HR department, because they're the ones who, Maria, you're kind of the expert on this in terms of how you actually cascade and communicate strategy across the whole organization. And it's often people not just in, say, the marketing or publicity departments, it's HR.
It's very important to work with the leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the top leaders and the middle leaders. Not necessarily they know how to engage other people, how to communicate, how to really bring people to the same purpose. So it's very important to create a system that put these people together, give them a way to do that in a better way. And it's one thing that is very important, and we have to be used to it, is that we will not impact everybody at the same time. Sometimes I see companies, they want a magical tool or a magical methodology that will magically communicate the strategy, will put everybody on the same page, will motivate people to do things, and so automatically people will change what they're doing or the way they're doing to a new way of doing things. No, any system in nature, any system works in this way. You have some people that will understand in the first time the message, so they will start turbulence, meaningful disturbance, meaningful disturbance, and so these things, this will start to grow, will bring results, and so we don't have to have fear. I do believe that it's my experience. Lots of organizations have lots of fear of doing things, to do some disturbance, but not doing that in a meaningful way, you are much more vulnerable to any outside disturbance or anyway. So of course HR has a very strategic role in organization, and is still a very big challenge. And I do believe that this is a group of people, and this is a theme that should be nowadays important area, important thing to work with HR, because they learned for a long time just to reproduce things as they are. They were not active but reactive of what the organization asked to them.
They weren't really central. They were a support
area, and support the area. It was always looked as an operational area, more operational. So I think this is one key challenge nowadays, and HRs in general, they are looking for a more strategic position. And I can see that organizations are more aware about it as well.
I think that's a really great point, because again, you know, a lot of people are studying Capra Course to, you know, develop. Obviously, a lot of people already have a basis in systems thinking, and we've had some really rich conversations. But when you're actually, and some people on the course, you know, they have either consultancies or they're looking to develop this, you know, because there are a lot of people that don't really want to kind of continue working in the current system, but how do you change it? And I think this is really interesting, that it's not always the people in an organization you think you have to speak to first. You don't have to go into the people running, say, a factory or the operations first to help really improve, make the company more, you know, clean, look at their technologies. It's the people side first, isn't it?
Exactly.
And so, you know, I'd like to thank Manuel and Claire and Jad for your great questions. I hope we've started to answer them. I think what I'd like to do now is continue just to talk a little bit about our recent trip to Greece, because this again was quite an amazing experience for, you know, Maria and myself. We were invited to talk about, you know, our work, Holonomics, customer experience with Salt, and of course, you know, the systems view of life. We were invited by a not-for-profit organization called New Wrinkle, and they're a very new organization, and it's just really brilliant because their whole purpose is to support social enterprises and educational projects in Greece. Also, I should say, our trip was also supported by a Greek natural cosmetics company called Apivita. I've already written up a case study, so some of you may have seen that. There's a link to it on the alumni network. And it's really interesting because Greece has, as all of you know, has been through this terrible kind of banking and financial crisis. And just in case you don't know, for any new startup, any new company, any new initiative, the banks pretty much have stopped lending out money. So this is a, you know, a great question for Manuel. This is an example of, well, do we really need some kind of new capitalistic kind of model or system to overcome these kind of fragilities in our existing system? But it was really interesting. So, you know, we talked about how do you really model not just a sustainable business, but a flourishing business. And, you know, we talked to many people who came to our workshops. They had some really, really interesting ideas. They weren't necessarily thinking, right, I'm going to start a business. I want to start an initiative. And there, it was just really interesting. You know, I really felt we talked a lot about how to really develop a system. And also the key thing nowadays is Maria and I, we define sustainability as the quality of our relationships. So while Greece is having difficulties, there's so much potential there. Their economy is basically 90% tourism, but it's about changing the way of seeing what happens when you combine tourism with education. There are some amazing things you could do in Greece. It's a wonderful country, but of course these initiatives are going to need to flourish by building up flourishing networks. So we talk about, well, who are the partners you could potentially develop relationships with outside of Greece, across Europe?
What's
your reaction?
And it's interesting because we discussed a lot about how to solve a crisis. Normally, the crisis is the evidence that something is not going well anymore. Something has a problem. And so we have to look into a crisis with a different eyes. In Greece, we saw, as in many other countries, you have a very rich nature, you have a very rich environment, and so the problem that we are facing is not a money problem or lack of richness. We are with way of seeing.
There's a bit of a fixed mindset at times that we need to change, and this is where we have to disturb in a positive way.
Exactly. Yeah? For instance, just to a very small example, crowdfunding nowadays is it emerged as a way of funding. Individual projects, so or new ideas, new business, but how in fact we are making good use of these new ways of financing things. So it's a very small example about to show how can we find new ways to solve crisis, economical crisis, and how can we really work in partnership, really work in network. So the power of a systemic way of seeing economic is fundamentally systemic, but we try to see it in a linear way. So it's terrible when we see a country that is having an economic problem like Brazil had, and Brazil is nowadays as well. And the traditional economists say a sentence, or how can I say, a solution. This country will take 10 years, 20 years to start to recover the economy. We have people producing, we have creativity, we have so many richness conditions to solve things, but normally we don't see differently. So again, the meaningful disturbance we should as activists, we should start this meaningful disturbance in order to promote new ways of thinking about how can we solve problems or crises or things that are happening.
And I think that's a great example of Fritjof's saying. What Fritjof says is that the crisis today is a crisis of perception. And this is why I felt that, at our event, in Greece, there were a wide number of people. And I think it was really about showing people possibilities that maybe they hadn't previously considered, because it is tough, trying to start something new in Greece. There is the culture there, but there is a desire. And it was interesting. We were invited to have a meeting at the Hellenic Federation of Enterprises, and this is a government body which brings together representatives from industry. And it was really great there. We met the director of sustainability, and they are actively supporting and introducing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, it's not a huge activity right now, but he did say that there are about 40 companies in Greece that are really looking at this. And also, I should say, New Wrinkle, they're actually very proactive in promoting the sustainability goals in Greece. So that was really great to hear as well. And then one other thing, one other project that we had the opportunity to visit, there's an organization in Greece that's linked to New Wrinkle, and it's called Organization Earth. And I talk a lot about, we both obviously talk a lot about customer experiences and designing customer experiences. My background for many, many years has been in user experience design, customer experience design. And again, some eco-activists can sometimes react a bit negatively to this term customer experience, because it sounds like selling, it sounds like marketing, it sounds like maybe a bit of
normally is associated in the mind to selling more, to grow, only seeing the customer as a thing, that I will activate in order to receive money. So there is a naughty
negative connotation. But what's interesting, when you look, there's a lot of innovation happening today. Not all of it is sustainable, of course, but in general, I think there's a crazy statistic that 78% of new products and services that are launched fail to engage with the customers or fail to engage the audience. And one of my key messages is this goes for sustainable products and services. It's not just, you know, commercial products and services. Activities, initiatives, activities, events. And I think Organisation Earth are a great example because they have a farm and an area of farmland. It's actually inside Athens in the largest public park. And it's an absolutely wonderful place to visit. It's right next to a shopping centre, which initially you might think, oh, that's not a great location. But if you think about it, families do visit the shopping centre, but it gives them an opportunity to visit this ecological centre that has as its purpose reconnecting children with nature. And they actually won an international prize for the best initiative to connect children with nature. And there they really focus on the experience. What is it like to arrive? What activities? And so there's no excuse for not thinking about the design and the customer experience of the people taking part. And, you know, we saw all sorts of things there, the technologies, how they're using farming in a sustainable way, or the biodiversity, that they're creating some natural areas that are not touched by humans to really bring back nature.
It shows us that nowadays the point is not or, but and. So we have to see with a different point of view, a different perspective, that sometimes we are in a linear way of thinking about things. So, oh, this is good, this is bad. The traditional system is bad and the new one is good. This is not the way that we have to think if we want to think systemically. In fact, this initiative, this Center of the Earth, this organization, it shows that they are really worried or concerned about how to give the best experience for people that go there, and at the same time bring new eyes or new way of seeing nature, the relationship between people, and not with any prejudice. Everybody's welcoming there, and this is something very important, that nowadays we have to help to build no separation, and to really know how to deal with differences and different people, different mindsets. This is the richness that we have to consider, and we have to deal with. So it's not the case, this is good, that is bad. But how can with this situation or with this context, how can I make a meaningful disturbance in order to put people together, in order to start changing a little the way they relate, in order to walk in the direction of sustainability.
Excellent. So kind of moving on, wow, I can't believe the time already. We're moving on to kind of the final section of today's masterclass. And this is really where we look at, well, how can you really have the maximum impact as an activist, but be really entering an organization and working with the people? And again, it's really a case of, sometimes I think people look at Maria and myself and we are working with large organizations, but it's not the case that, oh, you can just suddenly contact someone, tell them about your background, oh, you do systems thinking. it does take time to get to know people in an organization. So I think the first point is don't try and rush things. You actually have to build up trust, because we need to remember that when you're an activist, you do have quite a different background and motivation to the people who are struggling day in, day out in these organizations. They're trying to improve. You as an activist really want to help an organization, but it's really a case of getting to know them, develop a positive relationship. And for example, sometimes what Maria and I do, we're just asked to maybe talk for an hour. You know, just people hear about us and someone will say, oh, you know, could you possibly just talk? You know, I'd love you to just come. And this is a great way of, don't try and build Rome in a day. You know, there's a lot of you have just, when I think about the discussions we've had on Capra Course, you know, it's like education, leadership, you know, the actual systems modeling, there's like health, you know, happiness, there's all these different areas. And, you know, maybe you could just offer a small talk, and that is where not only you're not just in transmission mode. It's an opportunity to really listen, to really understand their business, and really try and think about, well, what are their immediate problems? Because often, you know, with systems thinking, it's very much about thinking in the long term, developing long-term solutions. But it's quite interesting. What Maria and I do, we're often asked to help with a short-term solution. And we do offer, you know, solutions for these immediate problems. But look at what happens. It just so happens that the solutions we're offering also have a very high degree of long-term aspects. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and this point is very important because the long term is abstract and the short term is a very concrete. So how can you introduce something abstract and you expect that people will automatically engage to that if they have a concrete, real, short-term problem? So we have to be aware about it, but the solution that we will find now is the beginning of the solution for the long term. Because one question that I always make when I am in an organization is where the long term starts.
It's a great question.
This is very important, because people say, oh, we have to do for the long term. But where it starts, the seeds of the long term are now. So we start from the concrete and we start to build the long term. And two things that we have to pay attention. The first one is it's not useful and doesn't work when you come to a person and say, oh, you are wrong, and I have the solution, and I will say for you what is the solution. This is the formula for the person stop listening to you. And the second thing that is very important, we have to really live what we are saying, what we want other people do or other people see. So we are the message. This is the key point. We are in a moment of the world that we have sometimes too much speeches, but less actions. So when we are inside our organization, if we are saying we have that the organization must to consider diversity, change the mindset, now know how to deal with changes, and etc. We have to leave these attributes before start trying to make other people. So all this way is a personal journey to really change in order to help other people see differently. So this is a very key point. You have to be the message. I think this is a very important, mostly for everybody, but when we are talking about consultancies, this is particularly very important. We are not there only selling or implementing a methodology, a tool. we are helping the organization to promote the transformation.
I think that's really interesting, because this is like the feedback that we receive.
Yeah.
People kind of notice the difference. I tell you, this is actually something really interesting for everyone watching.
Yeah.
People say that they can notice a difference between our consultancy, which is, a boutique small consultancy, and the really big ones. And I really feel now that there's a lot of opportunity for, small groups of people to really start entering, and I'm going to use the word compete, but maybe the better word is to complement the projects that are already happening. And I think another really interesting trend that we've noticed in the last year, maybe 2 years, is we're being asked more and more to talk about values, talk about ethics, because now companies, and this is coming from this most senior level, companies are now realizing that they cannot be sustainable in the long term without people really living the values. And what's interesting is that one thing, Maria, I really noticed this about you. What you say is that you will actually go into a company. I think this is quite brave, but it's quite amazing. You will go into a company, you will look for their values on the wall, and in meetings, you will be very explicit, and you said to me, you will ask people, show me an example of this value or this bit of the mission in practice. And sometimes people can't answer that. Could you talk about that? I think it's brave, and you do have to have a bit of bravery to do this, because it could be perceived as criticism. But when you're living a desire to help someone, it doesn't come across as criticism, does it?
Exactly. Yeah, and our work is to help people to see differently. Because normally when we are inside an organization, a system, we lose the ability to really see differently or with distance. So this is the main important role of a consultant. The consultant comes and have this perspective, and has this distance to see things how they work. And so with some very simple questions like this, please tell me quickly how these values that you have, the list of values that form the organization or in base the organization, how can you show me quickly some examples of them in practice? And normally people struggle to think about, even giving some time for them to think about. So in this moment, we can start a very flourishing conversation, because we started to really analyze, okay, so what put us together? Why we are working together here? What does mean our vision, our mission, in fact? So another way to do that is analyzing the mission and the vision. The elements of the mission, where are they present in our daily jobs and daily work? And so you can start with the elements of the organization. You can start to build a very nice conversation. And people started to realize, to be aware that, in fact, we really need to be serious about the things. And what is putting us together is something strong that motivates us to move on, or we are stuck in here in a process that we have to be more productive, but we don't know why and how. And so this is a very nice way to start a dialogue and to open hearts and minds to really start to think about the system they are living in, and they are helping to work or to form.
Because I think this is a great observation, because we mentioned Jared's question at the beginning. The question was, with us as business consultants, what potential do we see for corporations that can support the planet and not destroy it? And I think it's a case of, often when we do this, when we go in and analyze the vision statement and the mission statement, there's a lot of companies with really, really excellent visions and missions. The problem is that right now they're not living it.
Yeah.
And I think I just want to talk a little bit about dialogue in a minute, because this is the thing. We're not trying to necessarily change the mission and the vision of a company. It's what we're doing is, in terms of making a meaningful disturbance. Again, another thing that we'll often do is when we have dialogue sessions, we'll break down the mission and the vision into parts. Now, this does sound reductionist, but often we don't have so much time with many people. So have a listen to this. What we'll do, we'll get it's almost like a world cafe, and different people will start to look at keywords, key phrases in a vision and mission statement, and they'll start to discuss, well, actually this means this for me. And different people in different parts of an organization, you begin to realize that they do actually literally have a very different vision of what's happening in the company. But then you start to synthesize it, then you start to put it back together again, and you end up with exactly the same wording for the vision and mission, but you've expanded people's understanding and enthusiasm and engagement with what the company was all about anyway. And then you can start to say, well, how does this connect with the strategy of the company overall? And is the strategy really really serving the vision and the mission or not? And this is very high level kind of dialogue work, but it's just so important.
Exactly. And it's a very, before we start a dialogue, or to say, oh, people must to communicate more, to dialogue more, we have to really understand what we are talking about. The terms we use, the attributes, is the same for everybody. Everybody are they really understanding what we are talking about? So we have to be very careful, because we are talking with different mental models and perspectives from each person in a organization. So we have to be very careful and to really value these other point of views, and to create an environment, a very secure environment for people to manifest or to say what they are understanding about that vision or mission, for instance. Not necessarily everybody understand the mission and the vision the same way. So we have to start with the elements and the perspectives in order to grow, and to after that to discuss about strategy, why this process is very critical for us, who are our clients, what we really wanted to offer, what we are doing. When we wake up every day to go for work, we are working for what? These are very important questions that start to make people think about. Yes, I can do better. Yes, I can change things. This is the meaningful disturbance that we can promote.
And kind of like to finish, I really would like to, talk a little bit more about this whole concept of facilitation, because again, I know a lot of great people, they're facilitators, but sometimes, in conversations, they'll express a little bit of frustration that they don't feel they're having the impact. They're not really gaining the really big clients that they would love to have. And one thing I'd like to talk now is about the fact that why have we been talking about strategy? And the reason is because you really, really have to have a lot of detailed knowledge. For example, about how do you design a business process? This is a specialist skill, and this is something that a more general facilitator is not able to work on as a single person. Often in a large organization, it's not the case that one facilitator is enough. And so what do we do with Holonomics Education? We actually have a network of professionals, and we're not growing rapidly. We're not trying to grow, what we're trying to do is really identify those professionals who they have actually come to us and identified our values. They have said, oh, we would absolutely love to work, you know, with the Holonomics approach. We really think it's great. And so Maria and I, we're going in there facilitating these meaningful disturbances, but you still actually often need a team of 4 or 5 people to do things like work on business process redesign. A lot of companies are actually already in the middle of major change programs. And so it's really a case of you really now have to really know how to partner. Maybe a company will say, well, this consultancy here, we'd like you to join them. And that, you know, that has challenges, but it can be very rewarding if you really work on that relationship. So this is like another key message. If you are looking to do facilitation work, don't necessarily think that you're going to be able to go into a company on your own. Now, this is very much the systems of life. It's very much about developing a network so that when you do identify the needs of a company, you can actually make sure you have the right team involved to make these meaningful disturbances. And you're really talking the language of certain people in certain parts of the organization. Otherwise, people are just not going to think you have depth and, you know, the technical expertise to make these changes. What do you think?
And the one important thing, because we can't do things alone. We don't have all the competences alone, and we need other competences together in order to promote a transformation. But one thing that is very important is to really honor the others. Because sometimes we see some networks that are not works. After you can explain what is not works. But I work in network, but in fact I work alone, trying to convince the other and not honoring the other knowledge. So this is very important to create a network. It's like in natural systems. In our body, each part honors the others, otherwise the system wouldn't work well. So we in order to work together with other in a network, we have to honor the network. This is, I think, is important things just to add.
No, absolutely. So I'll explain this term, not work. Maria and I went to a co-creation event. It was a weekend-long event, and we kind of knew the people. We saw the ego involved. We kind of saw the hidden agendas, and it just wasn't really a co-creation event. But I actually mentioned in the spring, I actually wrote on the spring 2017 edition of Capra Course, sometimes you have to use humor. You know, we can't be too critical. So I actually came up with this phrase, not work, networks with ego, to really show that you can be there's still a bit of superficiality in terms of saying, oh, let's come together, let's work in a network. You have to work really hard.
Things.
You have to really have you have to have a real level of maturity and ethics to build a solid, sustainable network. And so absolutely, you know, some of our work is really, really developing deep networks. And maybe we'll talk about this in the next masterclass, because one thing, you know, Maria's been doing in Brazil is really transforming command and control organizations into networks. And this answers Claire's question. And again, I think that's probably, we need another hour to talk about this. But so be very careful about making sure that you don't accidentally end up in a not work, because no matter how much you work, your message and your meaningful disturbances will just get lost as people try to diminish you and take away your value, rather than really fully appreciating who you are and what you can offer and how you can really help build and develop, you know, companies for the future.
And it's very important to really see what motivates you to do that as well. It is a legitimate thing that moves you to do that. This is important. Again, we have to ask ourselves, what motivates us, because when it is clear for us, it's easier to identify our partners, the network. So this is an important aspect as well.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening. I can't believe it. It's just been so fast. You know, talk about working in a network. We both like to very much thank Mira. She does a lot of work behind the scenes to help with the masterclasses as well. So thank you very much to Mira. Also, the final thing is we're now able to offer private editions of Capra Course into organizations. So for those of you who may think, well, I haven't actually got the support needed to build a team, what you can do, you can talk to myself, contact Mira in the first instance, because we can actually offer a private edition of the whole course to an organization, and you can there do the facilitation, but you actually have Fritjof with the lectures each week to really help build up a foundation of systems thinking inside an organization. And it's an incredible way, a private edition, to really scale up knowledge about systems thinking, because as I said, we're seeing so many organizations now talk about systems thinking, but they don't necessarily know, well, what is the best way? And so a private edition, you know, you can offer it to your clients, or maybe you know an organization that would want to benefit. You can take part, Fritjof will take part with a Skype call, talk to people there. It's a very incredible tool to have. Yeah,
it would be very nice to include the whole ecosystem, for instance, in order to discuss you lively experiencing the system in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much. Maria and I, we received some very great comments from the first masterclass, and you know, we very much hope you've enjoyed this masterclass, not just enjoyed it, but really found you know, the information useful and helpful. We're going to be joined by the spring 2017 cohort soon. I think it's June the 15th. So again, in the network, in the alumni network, we can carry on the conversations. And again, if there's any aspects of what we've talked about today that you'd like more information on, we've actually got the thread, you know, the conversation in the alumni network. So please do continue the conversation there. And also, as you've seen, we do collect questions for future masterclasses. So again, please do feel free to get in touch with us, ask the questions, and you know, that this helps us make sure that we're talking about exactly what you guys are interested. So thank you very much. We've had a few people watch live, so really hope you enjoyed it. And also for those of you who will be watching the recording, again, we hope you've enjoyed it. And again, please do feel free to ask us any question about this at any point in time. Thank you very much, and have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.